In a small village, Sandra and Lau lived with their 4 daughters. Despite their love, they struggled with poverty. Lau worked on farms, while Sandra did odd jobs to make ends meet. They often couldn't afford school supplies or fees for their girls. Still, their home was filled with laughter and hope. One day, Lau decided to seek help from a friend in another village. His friend introduced him to a herbalist who lived in the forest. The herbalist's house was strange, covered in odd marks and surrounded by weird plants. The old man offered to make Lau rich, but at a terrible price. "You must use your children in the ritual," he said. "They won't die, but they will suffer." Lau was horrified and refused, but the herbalist warned him that he wouldn't make it home if he left. Trapped and desperate, Lau thought about their struggles at home. With a heavy heart, he agreed to the herbalist's dark deal, hoping it wouldn't be as bad as it sounded. The herbalist gave Lau a small, shiny object and told him to hide it in his house. "Your wealth will grow," he said, "but remember the price." Lau nodded, his mind racing with fear and hope. As Lau walked home, the weight of his decision pressed on him. He wondered how he'd face Sandra and their daughters. The path seemed longer, each step harder than the last. When he finally reached their small house, he paused, took a deep breath, and stepped inside, the shiny object hidden in his pocket. The herbalist gave Lau a black powder to mix into his children's food. Lau left with a heavy heart, carrying the weight of his decision. At home, he quietly added the powder to his daughter's meal, hoping it wouldn't harm them. The next day, a strange wind blew through the village. Lau's eldest daughter lost her sight, leaving him heartbroken. He knew it was because of the black powder, not just a coincidence. As the village whispered about the wind and the girl's blindness, a mysterious man in black arrived. He gave Lau and Sandra a sack full of gold coins, claiming to help. They were overjoyed, but Sandra felt uneasy as she looked at her blind daughter. With their newfound wealth, Lau and Sandra's lives changed dramatically. They bought farms, a large store, and a beautiful house. Their daughters enjoyed luxuries, earning the nickname princesses from villagers. Despite their riches, sadness lingered. Lau's eldest daughter remained blind. Sandra wanted to seek help, but Lau always refused, saying it was her destiny. The villagers wondered why Lau didn't try to cure her, but no one dared to ask. As the family enjoyed their new lifestyle, a shadow of sadness hung over them. The price of their wealth was too high, and Lau alone knew the truth behind their fortune. The once poor family now lived in luxury, but at a cost they could never truly repay. Lau and Sandra tried to focus on the good things, but deep down, they knew their happiness came at a great cost. 2 years passed, and their prosperity grew. Their daughters enjoyed the finest things, but the shadow of the first sacrifice lingered. One day, the herbalist summoned Lau. He knew what it meant. The herbalist told him it was time to renew his wealth, this time sacrificing his second daughter. Lau felt trapped but agreed reluctantly. He returned home and mixed another black powder into his children's food. The next morning, his second daughter became deaf and mute. The family was heartbroken, but Lau insisted it was destiny. Days later, the mysterious man in black reappeared, leaving another sack of money. Sandra begged Lau to help their daughter, but he refused, calling it fate. The pattern repeated. Visits to the herbalist, new afflictions for the daughters, and the man in black with his cursed gifts. The family's wealth grew, but so did the silence in their home. Laughter became rare, and smiles were strained. Sandra watched her daughters change, once full of mischief, now quiet and burdened. She saw Lau's eyes grow darker with each secret. Suspecting something was wrong, she decided to find the truth. One day, Sandra secretly followed Lau to the herbalist's hut. She overheard their conversation and learned the horrifying truth. Lao had caused their daughter's suffering through rituals for wealth. Shocked and scared, Sandra hid as Lao left, her mind reeling from the terrible revelation. Sandra returned home, heartbroken. She looked at her daughters, feeling deep sadness for their suffering. She knew she had to protect her remaining daughter, but felt powerless. She decided to keep the secret, hoping to make things right someday. Time passed and Sandra carried her heavy burden. Their wealth grew, but at a great cost. Then Lao was summoned by the herbalist again. Sandra's heart sank, knowing what it meant. The herbalist told Lao it was time for another ritual, this time sacrificing their last healthy daughter. Lao felt dread, unable to harm his last daughter. He returned home, limping and grim-faced. Sandra confronted him. "I know you went to the herbalist. What happened?" Lao admitted the herbalist wanted another terrible ritual for their wealth. Sandra begged him not to do it. Desperate, Sandra went to the herbalist herself. She pleaded for another way. After a long silence, the herbalist offered an alternative. "We'll make a wound on Lao's leg. You must lick it daily to keep your wealth. But if you tell anyone, you'll die." Sandra felt chilled but agreed, unable to bear losing her last daughter. The next day, the herbalist wounded Lao's leg. Sandra began the daily ritual of licking the wound, tears streaming down her face. Their wealth continued to grow. The man in black brought more money, but Sandra and Lao knew their riches came at a terrible price. Sandra endured the daily ritual, her heart heavy with sorrow. Though living in luxury, a shadow hung over them. Their house sparkled with fancy things, but sadness filled the air. It felt like they had everything, yet nothing at all. Sandra's task grew harder each day. Her eyes lost their sparkle, and a strange smell clung to her. The villagers started to notice. People whispered about Sandra as she passed by, saying something was wrong with her. Kids who once greeted her warmly now avoided her, making faces at the bad smell. Sandra felt lonely as friends stopped visiting. Lao was sad too, seeing Sandra's health decline due to his choices. Their home became gloomy, with heavy air and sadness. Sandra's daily task worsened her condition, and she longed for happier times. Their daughters, scared and confused, whispered at night, "What's happening to Mama?" They couldn't understand why their mother looked so tired and sad. As Sandra's health deteriorated, the village distanced themselves. Despite their wealth, the family felt trapped in a golden cage, isolated from everyone. The bad smell and secrets became too much for others. Sandra and Lao felt stuck, unable to fix their situation. Each day, as Sandra tended to Lao's wound, she mourned the loss of their happy days. One sunny morning, worried village elders gathered under the big tree. They had noticed Sandra's worsening condition and the family's strange sudden wealth. The oldest elder said firmly, "We can't watch one of our own suffer. We must find out what's happening." The elders went to Lao and Sandra's house, demanding Lao take Sandra to a healer. Lao tried to dismiss it as a passing illness, but the chief elder wasn't convinced. "Tell us the truth, Lao," he insisted. When Lao refused, the villagers sent men to take Sandra to the healer by force. They found her weak and sick, gently carrying her to the village center. Lao was restrained to prevent interference. At the healer's place, villagers gathered eagerly. The healer began her rituals, demanding the truth from Lao and Sandra. Terrified but unable to hide anymore, Lao confessed to using their daughters for rituals, following the herbalist's instructions. Sandra admitted to licking Lao's leg wound daily to maintain their wealth. The villagers gasped in horror at their confession. Suddenly, a miracle occurred. Their eldest daughter regained sight, the second could hear and speak again, and the third became healthy. The villagers were amazed but angry at Lao and Sandra. The elders declared, "Lao, you'll be punished for your deeds." Lao ran mad into the forest, never seen again. They told Sandra, "You should have spoken up. You're banished." She left, hoping her daughters would forgive her. The compassionate villagers raised Sandra's daughters as their own. The girls grew up loved and supported by all. This tale taught everyone that pursuing wealth at the cost of family and integrity leads to suffering. True happiness comes from love, honesty, and caring for others. The village thrived, and this story was told for generations as a reminder of life's true values.